fourth cup of wine, which ends our Seder. And clearly it gets all that grit out of our teeth.
Yeah. So there were discussions in the Rishonim about that the cup of wine doesn't get in the way of anything, because that's part of the Seder. And they say that the wine doesn't take away the flavor. You know, you saw it was foods that take away the flavor. And they even say that you actually can drink water. It's not a problem to drink water if you want to drink water, especially after all that matzah, you often need to drink water. So that's not an issue. The only issue is that you can't drink any more wine in between the third and fourth cup. That's what we said, because we're worried that you're going to forget to say Hallel. So we don't want you to do that. So that you can't do, but the wine that we're obligated, that obviously we're obligated.
Okay,
so
thank you.
That's not a concern. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. There are other questions for tonight?
We have the minhag after Chad Gadya at the second Seder to do Shir Hashirim, isn't it? Is it Shir Hashirim? I think.
Yeah, I saw you wrote that in the chat. Yeah.
And is that, how does that relate with regard
to? That doesn't relate to this, actually. It's disconnected. The singing that they were concerned for was, you know, I think partying kind of singing, and that if things would get out of control after a bunch of cups of wine. And again, a lot of what we do at our Seder, as I mentioned in a different class, it's a reaction to the Greco-Roman parties that were going on. And that's why I think Eim Maftirin Achar Pesach Afikoman is saying, we don't end our meal the way the Greeks and the Romans do, right? That's why maybe even they chose the language of Greek. I should have said this earlier in class, but the idea is that this is the reaction, right? We started with the poor people, right? We're not just for the rich. It's not just for the wealthy. And these meals are not just for people who normally recline and have all the gear for reclining, right? Even the poor people need to do this. It's saying we're taking what you do, but we're doing it differently, right? We're doing it the way we do it. And the idea here is that we don't have this partying. This isn't it's not a party, right? This is a serious meal. We say Hallel, we say praise to God. We're doing religious things at this event. And we're not having these big celebrations. Right? I don't think it was necessarily a reference to that this was what Jews would do all the time and have these parties after. I think they're talking about the culture of the people where they lived and what they were involved in doing.
Michelle, we do have a minhag to end with all those songs.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with singing.
Even the Chad Gadya, you know, all those songs at the end.
There's nothing wrong with singing. What they're saying is that we do singing of a religious nature. That's what it's saying. It's saying not, you know, random singing and crazy singing and, you know, that kind of thing, like rock concert kind of singing. I know some people soup up Chad Gadya and make it kind of sound like a rock concert, but you know.
Yeah. Michelle, was the implication that they played musical instruments when they sang after the Seder during the Hallel?
I don't think so. I saw you wrote that. I reacted in the chat. I don't think so. I think, that what they're talking about is the musical instruments are things you can't use. As they were saying, don't go out partying, whether with musical instruments or music, or that was the whole culture that they were saying, that's not what we do, right? What we do is praising God, right?
Yeah, here you go.
I doubt they use musical instruments, but you never know. Maybe they did.
In our chavruta, we just really like the word iskritin, and one of us pointed out that it sounds an awful lot like ice cream.
And if you go with the chocolate truffle theory, I'm coming to that Seder.
Yo, totally.
Yes, wrong truffles, but yes.
or chocolate covered matzah.
I think the custom this year is everybody has to make a mushroom dessert for the Seder.
Well, I've got a mushroom based vegetarian chopped liver recipe, so we can have that for dessert.
Okay. Since anyway, you're not really supposed to have dessert, so. But anyway, there's nothing wrong with dessert, just so you're clear on that, right? It's just as long as you do the Pesach, the matzah at the end. Right. Next week, we're going to talk more about the matzah and which is the real mitzvah. Like, what's the matzah of mitzvah? Okay, we're gonna talk about that. Like next week will be good because it'll relate to a few things we already saw about the matzah and being deoraita and the maror being derabanan, and where does that come from and where do we get it, and what exactly is the idea of matzah? What about matzah during the week? Is that a mitzvah or not? So we'll talk
what is the bottom line? What do they decide, and what did they decide in the end about when is the chiyuv to eat matzah? In the beginning, or because we saw different opinions, but what is le'alacha? Or is that
wait till next week?
Is that what we're dealing with next week?
So I have to remember if it actually deals with it straight on, but I don't recall exactly. But I mean, you asked for bottom line. This is not bottom line. This is Gemara, right? There's many.
No, it's not bottom.
Like you saw today. In other words,
you said to us, Michelle, why is it important?
Yeah.
You brought it up, right? You said, why is it important? Because it goes to whether one has to eat a whole kazayit at the end or not. Okay.
Yeah. So you want to know, do you have to eat a kazayit at the end? So we actually hold that you do eat a kazayit at the end. I have to look up why. I mean, I guess.
But we eat the kazayit also before. Right. We eat the kazayit twice.
We eat the kazayit for everything. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eat a lot of matzah.
Yeah. So yeah, we eat a lot of matzah. So yeah, I'm not sure how we paskin halacha l'maaseh. I mean, I think that really the first one is the main. I think that must be how we paskin because that's generally what we assume.
Well, it's the closest to the bracha. It makes the most sense.
Makes the most sense.
On the other hand, you couldn't have it not be before. You couldn't make the bracha only at the end and be yotzei any kind of mitzvah at the beginning. You can't really do it retroactively.
That was one of the sources said that.
Right.
They said that that's why you make the bracha earlier. That's why you make al achilat matzah earlier because you already started eating matzah for your motzi.
Right. It is a little weird. You would think according to that interpretation, you would make hamotzi and then you make achilat matzah after. But it would be strange to make achilat matzah after you already ate matzah. It doesn't really make so much sense. It's a very hard to
do with karpas and maror.
Understand that you really, the Rashbam, that you're really not fulfilling your obligation, right? It was the Rashbam, I think, that you're really not fulfilling your obligation with the first eating. It's very, very strange. But you see that, and then if you ask the bottom line to it, the bottom line for some people is, this is the main thing, and you do two kazetim, right? That's exactly what.
But he said that it's chovah there because it's lezecher, the matzah that you ate with the korban. But if we're eating it after we finished all our food, like surely matzah that we actually ate together with our meal would be the one that would be the zecher.
It could be they view them both. Could be they view them both. Just like we saw last time, there's the regular matzah, and then there's remembering the matzah that was eaten at the sacrifice, with the Pesach sacrifice. It's a very interesting question, really, about how central should the sacrifice play a role in our day today, right? Do we need to take this with us, and does it actually turn things into an obligation? Or like Rabbeinu David, who said, we're worried that maybe it'll be built next year, and therefore we better do things right now because otherwise, we won't know how to do it. Or is it just a nice thing, like let's remember the way things were, and it's just kind of nice to do, but not that you have to. So there's all different views about how we view this temple time period being relevant to us today.
Does Rabbeinu, it's also interesting about Rabbeinu David, does he also say anything else about, we do so many things to make it clear that we're not eating the Korban Pesach, but according to his logic, you could use the same logic to say, well, we should pretend to eat the Korban Pesach so that next year we know what we're doing. We should roast something this way, and we should.
Pesach people won't really confuse. I mean,
I definitely wouldn't confuse it. I'm perfectly happy not to. Don't get me wrong.
I get a question. At the time of the Korban from the Beis Hamikdash, everybody got a very little piece of that animal. That animal was a small animal, and how much did you eat? So didn't you have other things to the meal? Or not?
Yes. So they actually had a special sacrifice that people would bring called the Chagigah. It was different from the Chagigah they bring on regular holidays, called the Chagigat Yudalid, because they would sacrifice it on the 14th on Erev Pesach. And they would eat that alongside, specifically for this issue, that they wanted people to be satiated. from the meat. So they would eat that also. Everyone got also meat from there if they needed. If they had enough to go around and people had enough to eat, then they didn't. But if they needed more meat, then that's what they would do. So they definitely had more food.
But according to what we learned, they would have to eat the Chagiga first and the Korban Pesach after.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
So the matzah that was reminiscent of, or maybe this is anticipating next week, but the matzah that was reminiscent of the actual Korban Pesach, would that have been in what we do in our days as Zecher L'Mitzvah Kehillel, or is it, for example, that part, which is quite early on, or is it actually what we call the Afikoman, which is that last bit of matzah that has to remain in our tape? Which of the two is
so there's no
symbolic
good answer
of
to that
the
question?
Sorry?
What you saw today is that some people think that this is really the one that's remembering that, and that's
So there's
just remembering the way
about
Hillel did it. Then remember, there was a whole debate. Did everyone do it that way, or did only Hillel do it that way? And some people, there was a whole two different ways to how to understand that. Do people disagree with him and think the mitzvah mevatlot so and so, and that you actually couldn't eat them all together, and therefore people in the time of the temple actually ate them separately? So then we remember what Hillel did, but theoretically this could be remembering the temple in general, and it's not clear, right? This is the big question about all these things. Are both just reminiscing about the temple, and maybe we have two different ways that we're reminiscing about it, right? One is the issue that we ate it together with the maror, and one is the issue that we ate it at the end of the meal. So it's possible we're doing everything for the sake of remembering the temple, both of them. Yeah, Betsy.
If after the destruction of the first temple, some people never came back from, what did they do for Passover?
Right. So in general, and it's something I've mentioned in previous classes, which is most of these things develop more in the middle to the end of the Second Temple period time.
Okay.
And I think the people who didn't come back, they didn't necessarily, it didn't become as, in terms of historically what happened was things really happened around the end of the Second Temple time period. That's when a lot of things developed.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, because I can't picture that those people would all come back to the first temple.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I have a grandchild who was married to an Ethiopian wife, who is from the what they call the Kes, the Kohen. Yeah. She's from that family. And I have asked her, because I asked this last week, does anybody know what the Ethiopian community does in terms of Korban Pesach? And she says that they don't have any meat at all for the whole period of Pesach. And I asked her why, and she said she doesn't know. And I said, well, is there any book or anything, everything's in Amharic, and could she ask her family? And I haven't had a reply on that yet.
Okay.
But I'm wondering whether, because they did not have a Bet HaMikdash, that they just did not do anything resembling a Korban. I'm just wondering whether there's a link up there, and
right,
I haven't had a reply.
I don't know enough about it.
Question mark.
Let us know what you come up with.
Well, I don't know if she's going to answer me. She's got two tiny babies on her hands.
Okay.
I think I better not pester her.
Okay. Have a good night or day, everybody. We're going to end. Okay. Next week, our last week, but not our last week, as I promised. We